I am joined by some lovely quality professionals.
Hey, I'm Myron, Myron Parks. I am uh, um, a director of technology over reliability engineering at App Innovation, and my pronouns are he, him.
And hi, gang. I'm Ariel Smith. I'm the QA manager at Extra Games, and my pronouns are she, her.
I am so excited about today's episode because we are talking about risk assessment today. So thanks for joining, y'all.
I thought it was because we're talking about cupcakes.
I mean, yeah, that might be a real thing. Actually, it is. So I'm really excited today because we get to talk about food, which if you follow the podcast, you might realize that I get to talk about food a lot on here for it being a primarily technical podcast.
Primarily, yeah.
Primarily. I mean, we talk about a lot of things here. But
I
so
think QA you tend to be kind of a jack of all trades to a certain extent anyway. So, it makes sense that we have our hands in a lot of different pots.
totally makes sense. So I'm going to talk about the most important pot today, which which is the risk assessment pot. I know I say that every week. Like everything is the most important, but y'all, this is the most important
For real,
for
for real.
this week.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what risk assessment is first. And I want to start off kind of like with a lightning round, but I'm going to give you my definition first, and then Myron and Ariel, if you'll tell me what you think, and then we'll jump into the cupcakes. So what I think risk assessment is predicting all of the things that can go wrong, and then what can be done to prevent or absorb them. What's y'all's impression of what risk assessment as a quality practice is?
Yeah, I mean that pretty much nailed it on the head. In particular, I like talking about not just preventing them, but how can you mitigate the damage that they do, right? Like, because sometimes there are things that you can do that aren't necessarily fixing the bug, but allow you to make it so that having the bug in your game is not as risky.
Yeah, and I'll yes and that now, but I'll just use in my own words 'cause I typically do that. Um, uh, I just think what's the worst that could happen? Identify those things and put things in place to to make sure that we're protecting the experiences that are most important for the product that we're putting out. So
Yeah.
yeah, so like if there's misspellings, we may go, you know what? This is like a visual experience, so like let's not fix that one. Let's fix that one later, etc. So what's the worst that could happen, and which things are we going to actually prepare for versus ones that we aren't? We separate
Yeah,
choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. There
I
is
think
like a time management component, right? Like there's only so much time a given team has to spend on testing a game and doing their work in general. So, risk management is trying to figure out like what are the most important things to spend your time on, so that you can mitigate the most amount of risk.
yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into that mitigation too. And one way that I think is super key for that is having a dreaming session. And so over the past week, we've been encouraging y'all in the community to take a hop onto our Slido. Slido is a super cool tool. I'm not endorsing them, but I'm just, pointing out something really neat that's available. Slido, yeah. So what we did was we asked y'all in Slido to take a look and give us your nightmare scenarios. And our scenario is for opening our new cupcake shop. Just so you know, Underground QA, we're making an Underground QA cupcake shop. And there's a
Yeah,
lot of risk that goes into opening a cupcake shop. Um,
especially since very few of us have any food service industry experience.
Yeah,
yep.
I mean, I've eaten a lot of food service.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've done that too. Okay, this should be easy.
Yes.
Uh, Yeah, sometimes actually, this is a super good point, which is sometimes it's best to have a user. You can talk to users of your products as a part of this, but I the reason why I like yes, Lady Hot Dog for sure, 100. Um, so she said one day I worked one day at a kitchen at an amusement park. Surely that's enough. Yes.
I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Um,
Yeah.
so you know, risk assessment starts for my team with nightmare scenarios. And I think it's fun. This is probably the most fun we're going to have because we sit down as a team, and when we're in person and the world was a different place, what we did was we made post-its, and
Hmm.
people spent a few minutes just kind of thinking about what could go wrong. You can also make this a week-long exercise like we have with Slido, with tools, with collaboration tools that you've got. We've done Google Docs the same sort of way. There are tons of collaboration tools. I think Miro. Um, I'm sure there are a million other ones that I don't know. But there are a lot of tools that can help facilitate this. We're just showing one super lightweight version. And everybody writes down post-it notes and tells us what's the worst thing that could go wrong. And so I want to take a second to honor a few of these because I think they're amazing. Super shout out to Myron, to Kinetic, to our friend 10, and then a bunch of folks put in anonymous ones. So I'm just going to pull out a couple of these, right? Um, we unintentionally name our company after another IP and we get a cease and desist. That's so real, especially in the initial phase of forming your business. I really appreciate this one because it has nothing to do with the food, right? When we think about nightmare scenarios, we can get really focused on the end product and not the process of getting there. And they can be really important. We've also got one of our customers gets salmonella from uncooked cupcake batter exposure. That's a real risk. Uh, it's a very serious one that um, is there. A customer has an allergic reaction to an ingredient not listed on the packaging. Example, franchise uses peanut oil instead of advertised canola. There are two risks that are there, and whoever put this one in actually located two nightmares for us. Because they located one which is like we need to be very serious about that, and then two, we did something that we didn't agree to in our product requirements by switching the oils without informing our customers. You've got an interesting one here, and a couple that illustrate this, which is like a pandemic occurs and flour is no longer available. There's there's an amazing nugget of truth here, obviously in the pandemic part, but the second part is flour is not available when we need it. Right? That's our supply chain. That's not something we control. And then another one, the point of sale, the POS terminals go down. And that's something, I don't know if y'all have experienced this, but it's so frustrating as a
Yeah.
customer. And so what we can start to do is kind of noodle on these as a team, and they may actually help us guide our requirements. It's really good for our business owners to hear this. And so QA is facilitating this conversation, and maybe we decide we're a cash only business. Maybe the risk of having a credit card terminal is too much for us right now. We don't want to deal with that. And so this nightmare scenario conversation doesn't just help us from the quality perspective. It helps us from the big Q quality perspective of the whole team owning what's going into this. Now, it doesn't mean that the product owner is going to change, right? But
Right.
it means that we at least facilitate the conversation. Ariel and Myron, do you have any small um, pointers or tips here on how people can start to think about their nightmares in a different way, or any feelings that this exercise elicited when you were going through it?
Yeah, definitely. It reminded me of times where we have personae available, so we understand who we want to sell cupcakes to, and that informs certain things that could happen. So, for example, if we were targeting retired people who have fixed incomes that allow them to have, let's say, 6 cupcakes per week, we may trim down like the offerings that we have, or we may, for whatever reason, accept staler cupcakes, or in the case of going to a cash only business, um, we would have more intel on how we could service those people, and it would also inform the types of things that may impact our business.
Yeah, I the thing that came up for me was oh my god, my brain is totally just dying right now. Mainly just trying to get multiple perspectives on things. So like different people on any kind of team are going to bring different perspectives. So like in a food truck situation, for example, the person who's in charge of ordering supplies is going to have a completely different perspective on all the things that can go wrong than the person who is in charge of cooking the cupcakes, right? The cooking the cupcake person is going to be pretty focused on, well, what if we don't have the right ingredients? What if cooking the cupcakes go wrong? And they might kind of have some ideas about how other things can go wrong, but the person who's actually running the register or like running the kind of overall business plan and doing the accounting might say like, you don't understand, like we can't go to a cash only business because half of our sales come from credit cards and a third of those people don't have cash when they come to the food truck anyway. So if we switch to cash only, we are losing those people outright, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
um
It's super
so
important in
yeah.
that way.
yeah. That just reminded me of something else that that I've done in the past is like when we have like usability testing, like we release an internal app, the alpha goes to employees of the company, especially if we're a product company, and we do like some usability testing, and I use that term very loosely, and I would do it like wargaming, like we would have people representing certain personae, and I would actually come in with scenarios of things that happen external to the product and assume based on who they are supposed to be that they'll react differently. So we were doing a credit card product, and we had some persona. Like one was like a millennial, another one was like an empty nester, another one was a retiree. And so
Hmm.
the scenarios were like, um, stock market plunges 500 points. Well, the millennial may not be impacted at all, but like that empty nester or that retired person, uh, their risk or like the ways they behave were driven by this externality that impacts that business. And so that was we found a lot of value in the to your point, Ariel, the different perspectives for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of two sides of the same coin in the different perspective sense, like different perspectives in terms of the people who are doing the service and creating the product, and then different perspectives of
Yep.
the customers and the users.
So one thing to note is with this process, it's okay if nothing ends up shifting, right? If we don't end up shifting from being a credit card business to a cash only business. The fact is that we're facilitating the conversation, and your requirements on your product may be so amazing that you may not have any of these big requirement shifts. It's okay. So don't take this also as a way that you're not having influence. Like, it's okay. Uh, the the point of this is really just to start to facilitate what could go wrong. And maybe we did such a good job of having requirements that is not requirements based going wrong. It's the technology, it's the process. And so, you know, Ariel and Myron have brought up some really great points about negotiating this and walking through with the teams. But this is just one part of risk assessment. It's the most fun, in my opinion, and it gets the juices of the team flowing. But then what we're going to do is we're going to actually take a look at these nightmare scenarios and narrow them down to the ones that we actually feel are feasible. There's one where it's like a horse runs into the side of the food truck and dents it. Now, that might be outrageous for the middle of Los Angeles, but if we are parked next to a dude ranch in Wyoming and that's our primary objective for business, that might be realistic. And so again, while these can be really fun and funny, making sure that we're actually looking at the circumstance that we currently work and live in, like Myron has mentioned and like Ariel has alluded to as well, it's so important, right? So just keep those things in mind. What may feel outrageous may actually be realistic. So, our next step basically is narrowing these down. And so, if you're looking at the Slido right now, you're seeing that some of these are moving to the top. This is just a way, fortunately, that we've got a voting system here, but as a facilitator for the meeting, you can take it a step further and get folks to vote for what they feel is the highest priority of the risks. So you can facilitate that conversation, or what's the most likely, or what they feel like they worry about the most, what keeps them up at night, what's the nightmare.
I was just voting for the ones that we talked about.
But you were doing something that was amazing, which was kind of walking us through that. So it's really good meeting facilitation. Thank you, Ariel. I love that.
Sure.
Um, so, there's some really interesting things that you can do here. And again, those perspectives of all of the roles can really help you make a much better call, because we as QA will tend to think of a lot of nightmare scenarios on our own, but it's from our own experience and perspective and maybe talking with people. But again, the point of risk assessment is to really open it up to what could go wrong and how are we going to help make sure that it doesn't happen, or at least mitigate if it does, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we started our first part of risk analysis here, which is understanding what could go wrong and perhaps the probability of what's going on. So the next step is to talk about consequences, and that's also a foundational team step. And so the way that I look through this is we've got our little prioritized list from our sticky notes. We've maybe filled it out with some others. And for me, what I do is I put it into a Google sheet or an Excel sheet. And that's just because it's easy to look at, right? And sort, and filter, and whatever.
Right.
And then we add in a column that says impact or consequences, right? Because we want to know what's going to go wrong. And sometimes that's really important. Myron and Ariel, do y'all have any examples of or thoughts on consequences or what could go wrong? And when we're looking at this from a risk assessment perspective?
Yeah, I mean, well, do we want to keep talking in the cupcake context, or
Sure, I think it's great because it's universally understandable.
okay. So I mean, like, consequences you might deal with. You might lose money, right? Like that's a really big one. There's a lot of different ways you could wind up losing money. So I think it's more interesting to talk about them in smaller senses. So your profit margins might decrease. You might have to pay legal fees. You might not get as many sales. All of these are potential ways that your company could lose money due to things going wrong, like some of the things that we have here. So if just as an example, if a customer has an allergic reaction, then you could be facing a lawsuit if you intentionally or not intentionally, if you misled them for any reason, one way or the other. If a particular flower becomes unavailable, then you might have to find a replacement, or you might be unable to make the products that you use that flower for. And if you use a substitute, then maybe people won't like it as much and you'll get worse Yelp reviews, and eventually down the line, you won't be selling as many cupcakes. Or if you have to just remove that product from your line, then you might not have as many customers because they came for that specific one.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, those are kind of some of the things that come to mind for me.
Can you think of how that applies to you on a daily basis in terms of your job? Like, are there situations like this where you think about these kind of risks in games?
Yeah, so I mean, a couple ways that I might look at it is one is this is a particular bug that we release into the game going to cause people to view our game differently, in the
Hmm.
sense of, are they going to go from feeling like this is a good game that I'm having fun with to this is a broken game that I'm not having fun with, right?
Hmm.
Is it going to make the difference between a positive review and a negative review? That to me is something that I think about a lot. So bugs that are sufficiently like big enough that they would change someone's opinion of the game. Those are the kinds of bugs that I consider particularly risky. Um, Other kinds of bugs, and this is less applicable to my current project, but on previous projects can be related to microtransactions, right? Like if you're on a game that has microtransactions, anything that could cause people to either lose interest in spending money on those microtransactions or be unable to
Mm-hmm.
because they do not work the way that they're supposed to, or maybe the microtransaction doesn't charge enough, that it doesn't cost the amount of money that it's supposed to, right? So
Yep.
those are risks in the sense of the company will be losing money like directly
Yeah.
because your store is not working the way it's supposed to.
I
Um,
love. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I love the experiential side of things, like those that player focus is super important and something that we need to keep in mind. And Myron, I know you're an expert when it comes to the kind of back end, the technology parts of that. So can you relate some of this to perhaps some risks from the more technological approach or the process approach with the team and how you've experienced that in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Chelsea. So, like from a strengths perspective, I'm starting to look at it from a strategic perspective. That's why I'm like literally rocking on my seat, and I'm thinking, okay, so in this scenario, if we were looking at, let's say, end-to-end delivery of this service, right?
Mhm.
So I would start going, okay, all right, well, we're going to categorize these things into things that from a priority perspective, what's the impact of it, and what's the impact of our different systems. And so I would actually draw out the full value stream, of course, just in boxes, so we understand everything that's in the scope of what we're looking for risk for. And
Mhm.
then so like impact. Does this risk impact one thing or many things in this
Mhm.
chain? And then the second thing is because and this is a conversation that you're actually having at the same time, how much how much is it worth that particular risk to actually like fix it? So we're talking about dollars.
Yep.
Uh, like dollars dollars it's going to cost to mitigate or remediate that risk, and dollars that we're expecting to lose. So I would
Mhm.
begin looking at those things when starting to categorize those and laying a framework for the team to think about when they're starting to outline in that column what that risk looks like. And so this could be um, power outages. This could be we didn't update the security certificates. It could be we're using the
How many times
wrong
that's happened?
right like
It's the
you
worst
know
feeling ever to have that incident
Just
too.
you
did we
know
just forgot to pay the power bill? Like
yeah dude yes so
that's what
like
certificates expiring feels like to me. Like we just
Yes.
forgot to pay our bill, you know?
yeah, absolutely. And so like there's this XKCD comic where it's like the entire internet so it shows all this stuff at the top of the stack like Docker and AWS and all these other things and then there's this one little almost infinitesimal line where it's like um critical infrastructure maintained by one person in Nebraska since 2001.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like. Well, especially with the network certificates, it's always the one person that just did it
Yep.
and is either gone from the company or is like literally on vacation and it expires.
Yeah.
Um, these are the kinds of things that you can pull out when you look at that end to end. What are the things that are necessary for us to continue running this service? Um, do we have a Windows update cycle that's going to hit our servers the day before launch? Um, have we spoken to the have we spoken to the network ops or the engineering services team before we are deciding to do this critical thing for our company?
Yep.
Uh, most of the time, I'm going to say for myself, but we're notorious for this when we're just looking at the end goal for this product, even if it's a critically important thing for the enterprise. We don't talk to the people who are involved in the enterprise. And it goes back to what you said earlier, Ariel. Um, different perspectives.
Yep.
So, like, I would look across that value stream, and I would actually bring at least one person into the room from that to participate in this with my team
Yeah.
as well.
I think that that's a super good point. Like y'all are bringing people into the room and Ariel, whether it's, the person who's deciding the UX or working on the sentiment from the players or whether it's the network engineer, Risk assessment really benefits from that diverse perspective. And even if you can't get everyone into the room, perhaps just giving them the artifact of what you're creating can be a great step towards initially understanding what risk you've got. And so, from a management perspective, like let's look at this from different layers. There's product risk, there's project risk, there is feature or team level or pod level risk on a daily basis, right? And can QA perform risk assessment in all of those areas? Yes, but I think that they're inappropriate in some cases. And so I want one very common kind of discussion that I have with my group currently is what is the difference between product risk and project risk, and where does QA fit into this? And so what I believe product risk is risk to the product that is business related that we cannot quality control for in a development fashion. Let's say we talk about the pandemic side of things. That's kind of a product risk because it's environmental. Let's say there is an event that happens that causes product risk because we didn't do our due diligence in understanding what the market wanted. That is product risk. They're requirement risks that go on. And so those are much harder to mitigate for because they're largely on your producers on your team or on the business people for understanding that. So I want to make sure that we take a second and acknowledge that. Myron.
Can I give or what I think is a great example from the pandemic perspective, and it being an impact to the product? So, like every conference that you were planning to go to now, they've had to shift their prices to free. And so, what does that do to the budget for developing things? We may have had a budget of 10 million when we were planning to invite 30,000 people who paid $1,000 a piece, right? But now when it goes to free, that actually changes the scope of not only well, certainly it changes the scope of the product offering. And that's something that's a really really big consideration. And you may have to shift a bunch of things. Hopefully, you're an agile organization, and you have more agility to do those types of things. But it can shape, like just about everything about that product that you're going to be launching
Yep.
when a
Yep.
particular risk happens. And that's why you want to you that's why one of the things you want to consider or sort of like during the facilitation brief your teams on is you want to consider the likelihood as well.
Yeah.
And
And
that
we'll
may be
definitely get there for
yeah,
sure. So hold on. We're going to get there.
yeah.
Um, so we're just in this initial phase here. So what I don't want you to feel like is that you have to control for business risks. As a QA person, it is the product's job to understand a marketing uh, campaign that goes wrong.
Yeah.
Those aren't risks that we should be mitigating.
Right.
Um, we can't mitigate for prices being wrong on content that we want to get out, but we can facilitate the conversation to make sure that someone is having that. But that is not a QA risk. So, what do I consider a quality risk to be? And I mean quality assurance risk. It is things that are in your ability to have the conversation about. And what I liken those mostly to are project risks or feature risks or your day to day sprint risks. Those are things that QA has control over. So, what does that mean? Project risks are those which are about the process of creating the project that you're working on. Now, we often associate ourselves with the larger product, right? I work on X game. It is my mission in life. And that is and that's amazing. Like we as QA professionals in games very very often tend to be like this is my life, right? This is what I work on. I am the person for this, and this is my team, and we're the people for this. That's great. For risk assessment, we have to take a step back from that and really say, for the piece of the puzzle that I'm working on right now, what is the risk for the piece of the puzzle that I'm working on? What can I control? And what can my team control? We can control the assets, we can control the code, and we can control the way that we place those in the system so that players love what we're doing as much as we love it on a daily basis,
Now,
right?
Chelsea, can I interject a tangent that is lighthearted here?
Sure.
No.
So so when you said this, yeah, I don't remember exactly when you were like, "This is the game. It is my purpose in life," or something like that. I
Mhm.
just felt like Ariel and I should have said, "My life for ire." It just seemed like, like,
My life for Torchlight.
yes, yeah.
It's real, though. I
In
mean,
Altman we trust. It just seemed like something that we would is like a chant response that we should have said at that
Yeah.
moment. Um,
it's amazing though. Like we we take on a lot as QA, but let's be really honest. I want you to think about the things that we can control. Now, what if you're starting up on a studio that hasn't had a product or a project yet? Okay, risk assess the shit out of that. Apologies. We just went up to PG-13. Um,
yeah,
No,
yeah,
no. As long as we only say it once, it's still PG, I think.
yeah,
so, that's a thing, right? So it just, we need to be very conscious about where we are in the process, but I don't want you to look at this and be overwhelmed by all the things you can't control. Don't do risk assessment and feel like you got to make up for 10 years of really bad tech debt or player debt or whatever. That's not it. We want to work in the milestone, the time frame, the whatever you've got going on in the right now. Because so let's review our process. We have talked about establishing quality bars right before this, right?
mhm,
We have talked about planning our testing. And this is a part of that process. I told you in the past that my team includes risk assessment in our test plans. So we've just kind of taken a step forward, right? We talked about what does good look like, what are our quality bars, and now we're saying like what could go wrong to risk those quality bars. And this is it. You can even steal directly from your quality bars documentation or steal directly from your test plan documentation to kind of anchor people and say, like, all right, y'all, here's what we said we're doing. What could go wrong?
right,
So after we've done this first step, then we're talking about managing, right? We've dreamt of what could be. And now we're talking about managing that could be. And, Sarah, Lady Odd Duck mentioned tribal knowledge is a huge risk. I challenge you to always put tribal knowledge on your risk assessment. And that's because we should be talking about how to multi thread, multi empower our organizations. Let people take vacations. We made the joke about the one dude who's been doing the thing since 2001 and he goes on vacation.
yeah,
It's real. You, as a leader in your space, have a way to make sure that someone else knows what's going on.
I've
So I
always
challenge you to always do that.
I always talked about this in the sense of a person's bus factor. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yes.
this term, but
Yes.
a bus factor is the factor to which a team would be impacted if someone was hit by a bus. So, on my team, we have a couple of specific server engineers who are extremely knowledgeable about a very specific domain of server engineering, and so when things go wrong, their bust factor is extremely high because we are extremely dependent on their expertise of that system. And like they try as much as possible to like teach each other and document what they're doing so that if God forbid they're not there because of the worst, or if they're just on vacation, someone can come in and do that thing that we would need that specific person to do.
yeah,
Um,
You'll see
bust
this.
factor, a high bust factor is a huge risk.
It is.
Um, because then like you're talking about losing a person become for whatever reason, and it happens all the time. People like change jobs, they go on vacation, they're sick, whatever. You're not always going to have access to everyone on your team, so the higher their bust factor is, the higher the risk their expertise actually poses to the team because no one else has it.
Yep.
yeah. Like one of the things too. I'm sorry, Chelsea, is
You're fine.
it can be as simple as Comcast sucks still, and they in the pandemic they can't get online.
Hmm.
That's something that happens every week.
Yeah.
Yep. You'll
Um,
see this manifest too in people who are always on call. So you can
Yep.
tell these people by super burnout, by always on call, by the people we ping in Slack every time something goes wrong. So be on the lookout for these folks, and you may even want to pull them aside and say, "Hey, I'm noticing this. Do you mind if I place this as a risk because I see it happening?" They may be afraid to speak up in the room, but they may not be afraid to tell you how burnt out they are. And so take a look at the burnout factor, the bus factor, the are they the person we always call? And
Yeah.
are they the person we call even when they're on vacation? Because I've seen that. And boy, is that a terrible feeling
Yeah.
because they have to pick a place where they know they're always going to be safe to go. And having been that person in the past and not being able to go on vacation and turn my phone off and disconnect, it is very exhausting.
I'm going up into the Sierras. I'm not going to have cell service. Do not contact me. You won't be
Yeah,
able to. Like,
yep.
yeah,
And sadly some people can't say that,
yeah,
right? Um you also need to look at your test, a side note, but same thing goes for test coverage. If you have one tester that can never leave because they know how to do the thing, it's time to start talking about how to staff that person
yeah.
so that there is redundancy, not just so that they can go on vacation, but so that you can have a backup in case they find another wonderful opportunity or you need them to go and learn something else because they're an amazing human that tends to learn really well. Like, always keep these things in mind.
So I actually want to add on to this. This is really important. So something that I've run into in the past is I've had experts on my team who were really reluctant to share that expertise. Um,
Ah, yes.
and they would, like, when you ask them questions about the thing that they were an expert on, they would kind of hand wave and say, like, it's too complicated to explain, like, I'm the only one that could possibly be knowledgeable about this because I have the experience or whatever. And that is super harmful to the team, and that person is less valuable than a person who is willing to share their expertise with the team by a mile. And it's something that's kind of counterintuitive because you might think that, like, by holding all the cards, by being the only person who knows this thing, everyone is super dependent on you, that
Hmm.
they're going to be more inclined to, like, keep you around and keep you on the team as an expert. But it's dangerous and it's a risk, and that I would personally so much rather have an expert on a subject who is willing to share their expertise and decrease my risk, because that is what's important to me. And that
Yep.
is a more valuable contributor. So if you ever have this urge to, like, hoard your expertise, please don't. You
Yeah.
are only shooting yourself in the foot by doing that.
yeah,
Yeah. I look at it as a maturity thing, honestly. I was actually thinking about this the other day. As young leaders, and I don't mean young in age, I mean young in tenure.
yeah,
As
experience. Yeah,
young in our career people, what we will tend to do is to think that by hoarding information or keeping being the gatekeeper for information, we are keeping power. That
Yeah.
information equals power. And I think the longer that I've been in my career and the longer that I've been managing people and working with teams, the more I realize that what you actually want rather than power, which is political, is empowerment. You need to empower people to take action. And it's why, we hear it a million times, but good leaders delegate.
Yeah.
Why do they say that? Well, because good leaders know how to give people information to make decisions. They delegate and they empower people to make decisions. And so, if you ever want to say, like Ariel said, no, no, don't worry about it, I am the only person who knows, you are harming yourself. And I will tell you, as a more senior leader, every time you say that, it's a red flag for me, for
Yep.
one. And it could be very detrimental, and you could be putting yourself in a political situation for the future that is very scary. Myron, you're about to say something. How would you like to?
Well, I was gonna say, giving orders and calling it empowerment is not the
Oh
same
my
thing either.
gosh, right?
Could
Like,
you do this
yeah,
exact thing for me? Thank you. Do you feel empowered?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's not it. That's not
Yeah.
it.
yeah,
Empowered teams are teams which can make decisions together, and risk assessment is a very non-political way of doing that. So you are creating systems by doing this process. If you're not doing it, if the only thing that you're doing is testing and reporting, start to add this in. If you're not going to add in test plans, if you're not going to add in quality bars, which I caution you that you are missing out on a lot of things. Risk assessment is the next thing that I recommend for you as a starting activity for bringing more quality in with that. I'm going to refer to it as big Q, but that's when the whole team owns quality. If we start to have
yeah,
these big quality conversations, um, that's it, right? So let's move forward. We have our list. We've made our list of all the things that could happen. We've had a death match about which of these are actually viable and which aren't. You're going to hear things from your engineers like AWS doesn't matter. We shouldn't list it as a risk. And um, look, you get to make the decision. Your engineers, your producers, you're going to have moments where you have bad discussions in risk
yeah,
assessment of like, this doesn't matter. This isn't actually a risk that we can control. And what I'm going to bring to you is going to elevate us to a PG-13, but there's a model of living that I tend to go by, and it's the cover your ass, the CYA model of living. And it's not that I have to use it to feel safe with my team, but if you don't feel safe with your team, the cover your ass model is a very good model for living.
yeah, yeah,
And if you do feel safe on your team, what you can say is, my team trusts me to bring up everything they possibly can. So your list, you may have instant rejection. And what you're going to say is, hey, can we just keep this on here for my sanity? Because what I'm trying to do is just protect us. And I just want to say we've called it out. There's no harm in having it on the list. Now, some
Yeah.
things are just going to be like, hey, this horse that doesn't exist in Los Angeles is not going to run into the cart.
right.
And that is okay. Like,
Yeah,
no, pick your battle.
yeah, and there's also fun. So like there's a way of facilitating it too. There's a number of facilitation tools that you can use to get the things that are not likely and get consensus. So like what's not likely is determined as the consensus of the team. So like if you have a team, uh, what I've done before is I've actually used like a March Madness bracket
Yes.
for things. And the energy in that room to get to the final four, that's essentially what we would narrow it down to. The primary risk would win the championship, but we would narrow it down to like the final four. Okay, all right. Of all the things that we did as a group, we believe these are the five or the four risks that we're going to essentially spend money on. So there's facilitation tools that you can use to get through as a team determining what's impossible.
So Myron kind of just mentioned it, but there's a risk negotiation, right? We've made our registry, our list of things, and then we're going to negotiate on them. What are acceptable? What are unacceptable risks? And the way that we get through that is by understanding two things: the likelihood and the impact of them. So,
I would also want to add just a little bit of a wrench into that in terms of the not just the impact, but the degree to which you are able to mitigate the impact and reduce
we'll
it, and
get
the
there.
cost of doing that. But
We will
okay,
get there.
good.
We're not there yet. So, first off, we're just talking about the likelihood and impact. And it's because I don't want to anchor the team in, we don't have an AWS engineer who understands blah, blah, blah. Don't go there. Don't allow that conversation to happen when you have the list of things, unless they're like literally, yeah, y'all, I promise we're going to get there. um, uh,
We keep jumping the shark up in this piece.
it's okay. It's okay. We're going to get there. So, we first off are going to say, like, look, we have this list of things. Let's immediately toss out things that we instantly know are not a project risk for this. Don't toss everything out. Just have a quick glance. Hey, is any of this magical fairy tale land? Okay, toss those things out.
Yeah.
Next. And you may not even do that initially. What you may do is just start the likelihood and impact conversation. And
Right.
those two things are going line by line and talking about them together. Now, what my team did was we created a custom matrix for us that was likelihood score of 1 through 5 and an impact score of 1 through 5 and what those meant. So, a 1 is the lowest score. You cannot, like, uh, don't be contrary here because there's a formula. It could be 1 through 20. I don't care what it is. Come up with your own scale, but the highest number has to be the highest risk. And there's a mathematical reason for this that I will get to in a moment, which my colleagues really want us to get to. But what we're going to do is we're going to measure everything by the likelihood and impact line by line. You're not going to do all the likelihoods and all the impacts. Nope. You're going to go line by line. And so I'm going to refer back to our Slido here. So we've got a couple of things. Number one of our customers gets salmonella from uncooked cupcake batter exposure. Ariel, Myron, how likely is this to happen?
I would say there's been a lot of salmonella outbreaks recently. I would, at least in my mind, I would say 3.
A 3. Okay. And so on our scale, a 3 is for likelihood pretty likely to happen. A 5 is it's definitely going to happen. And a 1 is it's probably not going to happen. Well, it's definitely not going to happen, but we have to say maybe. Ariel, how are you feeling about this?
One customer, I would say 4, right? Like it's very, very likely that this will happen at least once at some point in your food truck's career, unless you are just real on top of it, which I hope you are.
And then, oh, go ahead.
No, that was it.
And then even as the QA person in the exercise, I get the chance to give a score too. So don't count yourself out, right? So I'm going to say, hey y'all, we have this oven technology where it actually has a thermometer in it that a probe that is measuring, and so we are very unlikely to have an undercooked cupcake because of this technology.
Nice.
And um, because I understand that system
Mhm.
intimately, right? And Myron has been handling the marketing and Ariel has been handling user sentiment. And so, they may not be knowledgeable about the content, but they're still a part of my team. And so we have that discussion. And so I say, okay, Myron, given what I just told you, how do you feel?
Oh, okay. Well, uh, that lowers the price of the insurance we have to buy. So I would say probably like 2. And I'm going to tell them about the technology. Shows here that it was actually developed at NASA. So that's going to be great.
Okay. And Ariel, how are you feeling?
Yeah, so I would think about like, okay, well, are there other ways that we could get salmonella into a cupcake? Like maybe there are there's salmonella on the surfaces of the food truck or something like that, and that's how it gets into the cupcake. The fact that
Yeah.
we have this technology means that the likelihood is reduced. So I would say like down to 3 or something like that. But I can still easily conceive of it happening some other way. So I'm not going to go all the way down to like 1 or 2.
And so we can keep having this discussion several times, but I'm going to say, Ariel, you just convinced me. And it's kind of like if you do sprint planning and you're talking about velocity and you're measuring, you can take an average if you get to an impasse. It is okay for you to have partial fractional numbers if it makes your team feel good. Um, like we're just going to get somewhere. And I would say, and you can influence this too, and you can say, hey, so I feel like we're currently at a 2.5 or a 3. How do y'all feel? And Ariel, how do you feel about going down to a 2.5?
I feel like we we need to stay at 3 as long as the bar is a customer. If there was if we changed the nature of the frequency of this risk to like, we are frequently giving customers salmonella, or one customer a week, then maybe I would go down in likelihood,
Okay.
right? Like I think
So
chances of us giving it to one customer a day, for example, that's really low. That's maybe even a 1. But one customer a week or one customer a year kind of increases for me up from there.
okay.
Um,
So we end up at, we'll say a 3, because the team can't necessarily get to an agreement. The highest generally will win at that point. In my team facilitation, it's totally fine.
I win.
So
Oh.
so then we talk about likelihood. And Ariel kind of primed the pump with this. These are 2 separate measurements though. And so I want you to try to separate these out with your teams as much as possible. Impact is um, let's try to keep likelihood out of our mind. If we can't, try to redirect. So likelihood is it's 5 is definitely going to happen. And we can talk about frequency if we want to, but we don't have to in that part, because honestly, if it happens one time, it could be dire enough an impact. So what we also didn't talk about is what happens if it does happen. And so the phrase that I frequently use is, for impact on my teams, that is the vice president or the CEO or one of the C suite coming over to my desk or sending an email or sending a Slack message to ask about what happened.
Yeah.
That's a bad impact, right? Or something gets started on the forums or on Reddit. That's a bad impact, right? Now, something gets started on a slightly offshoot, smaller subreddit, or one post gets 300 views. I'm not, that's a smaller impact,
Yeah.
right? So when you're talking about impact, try to keep things to what happens if it does happen. And then for likelihood, again, we're gonna have that separate conversation. So in my opinion, I'm gonna be like, 5, someone's gonna get salmonella. Based
Yeah.
off of what Ariel has said and what scientific studies show, it's gonna happen. Like, I don't want you to actually feel this way about food, because this is not, this is very,
Yeah.
whatever. But 5, it's gonna happen, right? And we're going to go around and
Mhm.
I'm going to say, Myron, how do you feel about that? And Ariel, how do you feel about that? And then we're going to put the score in. Okay. So what do we do after we've done this for every line item that we've got? We multiply those numbers across. And so let's stick with what we actually said. Um, if someone gets salmonella, there's going to be a news article written. It's going to possibly get the health inspector to come out, whatever. We end up at, let's actually call it a 4 once we have this. So you'll notice in our likelihood conversation, we actually had to go back and change our impact score. Totally
Mhm.
okay. We multiply a 4 times a 5 because it's going to happen, and we get a score of 20. And then we have this risk score that's a column of numbers. Now, Myron mentioned he does a final 4. In my team, what we actually do is we'll take the top whatever number that we feel like we can mitigate against because the score is the highest. We prioritize our risk scores. And Myron is also prioritizing them, but you can take 2 different sets. Now, what if we have 2020s? The final 4
Sounds like a risky business.
yeah, but the bracketology approach might be the thing, because what we have to do then is we have to get these into our sprints or
Yeah.
into our work system to fix them. They
Yeah.
become work that we have to do.
Yeah.
We log risk JIRA tickets on one of my teams. They're actually a type of ticket so that we can track, and we have the mitigation steps.
Yes.
So, my friends, we're going to go into the mitigation steps next.
Can I make one point there
You sure
when you put
can.
them in there?
Hmm.
This is one of those pro tip moments. Make sure that you are using language that describes these risks that you're logging in Jira or wherever you're logging them, in language that your stakeholders understands is their problem. Because if you talk about risk tickets, or if you talk about bug tickets, or you talk about issue tickets, that might sound to them like, well, that shit's your problem.
Or
I'm sorry. Oops,
that
we just
risk is
broke
assigned to
PG
someone.
13. Yes.
So
Um,
it's on them now. Yeah.
yeah, it's super important to say things like, these are the things we think we should pay for to your C level sponsors and things of that nature. and you want to make sure before you leave the room they lean in and actually join the conversation, because that is a point in which you've begun speaking to them in language that they understand to be their problem and not just yours as a part of the development team or
Yep.
whatever.
Super
So
agree.
the way that we actually organize this kind of thing on my team is we have a playbook. It's the live ops playbook, and it's basically like a list of all of the things that can go wrong, and then a list of all of the ways that we can react to those things, and which ones are applicable to what situation. So we have scenarios, and then we have plays, and so sometimes there are some plays that can apply to multiple scenarios, and other times they're very specific. One of my favorite plays is actually do nothing because like sometimes like you literally like something bad will happen and you just have to wait for it to stop
Yep.
happening, right? Like the power goes out in the city. You have no control over that. You just have to wait for it to stop happening. I mean, and sometimes you're going to have risks and you're going to have situations where there isn't actually an answer or a response you can make aside from
Yep.
ride it out until it's not a problem anymore.
Yep.
But hopefully, with the vast majority of them, you'll at least have like a couple of options, if not, a few.
Yep. And so I think, what we've done, I just, typed in a thing here, which is okay, so we made our risk registry, we did our negotiation,
I like
right?
that word, risk registry.
Yep. Um, so we registered our risks, we negotiated about them, and we talked about what's acceptable versus unacceptable. That's that rating and picking what we're going to do. And then we're going to update our test plan based on that risk management, right? Maybe we need to change up how we're testing. Maybe we illustrated that there's a risk in our environments or a risk in, and when I say environments, I mean our ovens or our mixers, right? But
Our
those are
dining
things.
area,
Our
the
dining
dining
area,
area
exactly,
environment. Yeah.
exactly. Um, there are other things that you're going to get people to go off and do that aren't necessarily tasks. And so let me give you an example. Um, Catering, right? Or if we're talking about events, you may not be managing events for your game, or you may not be managing the catering that's going on for your food truck, but you need to make sure that people understand the upfront cost of what those things mean. And so we may need make some process changes for how we interact with our customers or our community managers or whatever based off of that information, right? So not everything that you do is going to be action for your team necessarily. It's going to be negotiating with external teams. That also means you're getting their time and on their calendars, which you also have possibly no control over. So this can be a big thing. It can be overwhelming, but you have a community of people. Our Discord channel is really active. If you need advice on this, there are lots of us who have tons of resources and experience. And so bring it up to us. Join the Discord server and hop in and talk with us about how to negotiate some of this. And so we've got our scores, we're getting things into our system, and then we're planning. We're really trying to plan like what happens if this really does happen. How do we escalate? And we create mitigation plans for when it does happen, right? Mitigation is damage control. Fixing it, if we don't have the time to fix it or if we don't commit to fixing it, we need to figure out how to mitigate it,
Yeah.
right? And Ariel mentioned it, the playbook. What do you do?
Yeah.
And the playbook is going to be different per discipline, right? You on QA are going to have totally different things to do than the engineer for the mitigation plan. And that's okay. Someone's going to be holding an RCA, someone's going to be you know,
What did you mean
creating.
by RCA real quick? I just want to explain our acronyms.
Yeah, sorry. So RCAs are basically retros on issues.
Gotcha.
And they're how can we do better next time? What was actually wrong? And so RCAs are super important, right? They should be a part of root cause analysis. Sorry, I didn't even define it. um
I knew we'd
so
get there.
yeah, Sorry, y'all.
Go
No coffee this
team.
morning yet.
We got it.
Yeah, we got this. So
We got you.
RCAs should always be a part of your mitigation plan, right? Someone is going to own the RCA. And you can even call that ownership out now. Hey, if this problem happens, engineering's going to RCA this because they're the primary owners of this.
Yeah.
Or you can say, hey, QA will always own RCAs. We're happy to do that. And we're going to run them and facilitate them. We just need your buy-in. And so what we're really trying to do with understanding mitigations is making our players as comfortable as possible when things go bad. And sometimes there's nothing we can do about that, and it sucks. But sometimes there is stuff we can do about that, like build in a feature that will help us, right? Um, there are features that you could think of that are like, hey, if our inventory system goes down, we need to make sure that we build a page that says, hey, the store is down. Thanks for coming by. Come check again, right? Because we may not have thought about what happens if the store goes down, but we just did, and we realize that there's a gap in that coverage that we need to do.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
actually have an example of this I really want to give. It's a
Sure.
great story. So I worked on a project where we were doing this massive item change. So we were basically changing items from being having every single one of their qualities specified in the item's like ID, right? If it was a weapon, it would say weapon, rare, sword, whatever, right?
Mhm.
We went instead to switch to a dynamic item system where an item was a sword and then it had all of these other qualities to it. So what we had to do is a massive migration for all of the items in all of the players' inventories where we took the old items and we turned them into the new ones. And if this process broke, the item would just turn into like a non-existent thing that could not be used for anything, basically.
Wow.
So we were talking about like, changing tens of thousands of different kinds of items because there were all.
Uh-oh.
Oh no. Ariel disconnected.
Oh no.
I'm sure she'll be back.
Yes.
Um,
In the meantime, oh.
There we go. Okay.
okay.
I lost you. Okay, so like I was saying, we were making this migration to this new type of item, right? And we were thinking about like, well, gosh, what if this goes wrong? What if like the for whatever reason the migration like breaks and we don't properly migrate some of these items? And so what we decided to do is, all right, well, let's make sure that when we do the migration, it tracks what the items used to be so that if something does go wrong and it breaks, we can go back and fix it. And so what happened is all of the items that were in people's account stashes did not migrate properly. And because we had built this feature to be able to go back and fix it later, we were able to do that like the very next day. We just reran the migration script specifically on the account stashes. And that could have been like a disastrous change that would have meant that we might have had to roll back our database. But instead, we were able to just run the migration script again with like a couple of tweaks to it, and that was enough.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah, it was one of my favorite examples of like mitigating the risk of a terrible bug, right? Because we had pretty good reason to believe that like there's a good chance that maybe some specific item won't work or some specific area of the game won't run the migration script quite right. So we decided that that risk was worth taking the time to build a feature like that so that
Mhm.
we could fix it later if we needed to, and it turned out that we did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was gonna say, um, pro tip, you definitely want to score these activities and get them in backlogs.
Yes.
You want to make sure that you keep opportunity costs in your sprints, and that's essentially if we do this, we can't do that,
Yep.
and make sure that your stakeholders understand that because these activities, if not scored, they will happen during your lunch, during your vacation, over your weekend. You'll be finding a safe space at Disney World to swear at people online, and you will be uncomfortable at the stairs. Uh, I'm not speaking. A friend of a friend told me that, but if you swear at people loudly in a restaurant at Disney World, like people, like the entire place will be very quiet when you realize that you're the cause of the disruption. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just
It's
saying.
it's one of those things where all of us have different work systems. And so I've been fairly prescriptive with showing you some models for my team, but I want you to know that however you choose to do risk assessment is a benefit for your team. Like
Yeah.
literally, even just having the conversation and not scoring it is better than never having the conversation.
Yes.
Putting it into Jira or not putting it into Jira, I would highly recommend you do get it into your tracking system. But if you need to make a Favreau board because that's what's going to help you for your team or a doc or whatever, do the thing.
Yeah.
And so, like I don't th- this is an ISTQB standard activity. You can go and check it out on there. You can check out tons of talks that have been given on this. You can message any of us and talk to it. Regardless of what you do, just do it. And like realize that for the for you to have a seat at the table, this is an instant way for you to get buy-in from your leadership that has dollars and cents attached to it. This is the way that you get more people hired on. This is the way that you show the value of what quality does. We are not testers. We understand quality, we understand risk. This is the name of the game. If you want to ask me for the one activity that I think that will change your life in QA, and this, I've said it several times, risk assessment is the activity for you to grow your career. If you get good at this, you will go very far. You will learn how to manage people. You will learn how to manage development teams. This is it. This is the tip. You can stop listening to the podcast after this. No, please don't. Um,
Yeah.
this is where the money's made, though, and lost. And your business knows that. And if you bring quality QA in to do this activity, this is it.
Yeah. This is
You're right.
really where I felt like I personally leveled up in my career, is when I stopped thinking so much about, well, what's the best way to catch every single bug in the game, and instead, because
Nope.
that's not, you're not going to be able to do that. You're
No,
never going to be able to catch them all.
no.
This isn't
Yeah.
Pokemon.
Yeah.
So
I can't even catch them all in Pokemon.
I know, right?
Yeah. I broke my elbow trying to catch them all. By the way, did I tell y'all the story?
We'll get to the story. We
We'll
will
get
get
to
to
Yeah.
the
the
story. Maybe
story.
that could be our bug of the day, is
Yeah.
Myron's elbow story.
But I did want to just say one thing though, like um beginning to do so, like I leveled up also, like personally in my career when I realized that we were in the business of bringing products to life. um, and through doing activities like these, and what Chelsea and I discussed in the why for test planning, we began talking about, and if you follow a theme, we've mentioned interactions with CEOs, interactions with the board, interactions with vice presidents, C levels. When
Yeah.
you're involved in issues in situations like these, you will, for some reason, you will magically find yourselves in impromptu conversations with your CEO. Hey, I know you, Chelsea. Like, how's the family? What's going on? Like, all of a sudden, like you begin forming these relationships when they find out that you're the team that's bringing this level of value to the business, to the organization.
Yeah, I think I just had someone recently start, and they were on a very, very big project. It was very overwhelming, and he did a risk assessment, and it literally got the attention of the whole company. And it was like within the first 3 weeks of him starting, he had changed the perspective of the entire team, changed the way they were rolling everything out, changed
Yeah.
the way they were communicating. And he came in at the very last minute. Like the release was happening in 3 weeks, whether or not he was there. But he was able to add in so much value, even in those last minutes. So it's not too late for you. It's never too late to do this activity. And you can take it in as bite-sized chunk as you want. But this will
Yeah.
help you. This will help tell
Yeah.
you what test cases you should run.
Yep.
You want to run those high-risk test cases first,
Yep.
right? This becomes your risk pass. This
Yep.
becomes the things that you direct your external testing partners to. Hey, can you check and see if this features the thing, right? It can be the basis for ad hoc.
Yep.
So, this is an extremely powerful tool if you wield it in the right way.
Can I steal a quote from somewhere else that people may be familiar with? But it works if you work it,
Yeah.
and that goes to it doesn't have to be perfect, but when you start doing it, and your team starts getting to do it, you'll make sense out of it, and you'll get better, like at doing it, like for your team, for your project, for your product. So it works if you work it. And I'm sorry, Ariel, I cut in on you.
Oh, so I thought of another kind of practical example of this and sort of how my brain shifted in terms of looking at QA when I switched to thinking about things in terms of risk. So I talked about this before, but there was a point where my QA team was like drastically reduced in size, and so we had far fewer people, and we still had to do like roughly the same like test. We had the same amount of testing that needed to happen, right? The same amount of risk that needed to be mitigated, but a quarter of the team size. So we looked at all the things that we did, and we asked ourselves like, all right, well, which of these things can we drop? Which of these things can we decide that we're not going to do because it's not worth the time? And based on like, first of all, where we were finding our bugs and where we were finding the most important bugs, we looked at the list of things and we said, you know what? Verifying all of these minor priority bugs as fixed is actually not a good use of our time because it is not, these are not risky changes, and we are not finding a lot of bugs when we do that activity anyway. So we're just going to stop doing that. And so we just started closing bugs as fixed, done, whatever, just as soon as they came into QA because we knew that it was just not worth our time to spend on it. And a couple months later, we looked back at the decision and we were like, was that a bad idea? Did anything bad happen because of it? Actually, no, nothing bad happened. We didn't miss any big scary bugs. There wasn't like any like comeuppance in terms of making that decision. So if prior to thinking about risk management, I would have thought that that kind of thing was crazy, right? Like you
Hmm.
can't just close bugs without verifying them as fixed. Otherwise, you'll still have the bugs. And the objective is to catch them all, right? Um, but it's really not. It's really not. It's really about making sure that you mitigate risk as
Yep.
much as possible.
And I mean, I think, the contingency of you having to deal with that is something that you deal with. But I think,
That in itself is a risk to talk about and mitigate. What if we have a sudden headcount reduction? How are we going
yeah,
to mitigate that risk?
absolutely. I think, one thing that we don't think or uh, this Pokemon though. The only thing that that we don't really talk enough about is how we can all help each other in the risk side of things. Our producers own a lot of risk, and our engineers own a lot of risk, and our UX designers own a lot of risk. And when we sit down and we do this, we really allow there to be an airing of, oh my God, this is scary. But
Area of horror.
exactly, it's why the nightmare scenarios thing is so exciting and
Yeah.
whatever. But ultimately, something that I've started to say, as we finish this up, a really big thing that I talk with my team about, and Ariel, you've kind of mentioned it. We're spending player dollars. If we look at everything that we do as spending player dollars, where can we spend those player dollars that are the most impactful places.
Yeah.
What are the bugs that we need to fix because it matters for player dollars? What are the experiences we need to make sure are key because player dollars? And I don't mean that in the sense of winning player dollars. I mean making players feel like they spent good money when they came to play our games.
Yeah.
It's
The
not
money I
about
spent on this game was worth it because it
100%.
it has the quality that deserves the 30, 60, 70 whatever dollars I spent on it.
Yep. And so for games, for free to play games where there's cosmetics, you really want players to feel that way because they choose to spend money on it,
Yeah.
right? For games that we have microtransactions, players are choosing to spend incremental dollars, and we really want them to feel good about that. And it's funny, we've said this before, but chances are, if you talk with someone in QA and you're like, how did someone in QA not find that bug in that game? You're like, oh no, they did.
Ah! That
Yeah.
question.
Yes.
But the player dollars, production felt like, or the engineering team felt like, or there wasn't enough time because there were other things that were getting fixed that were probably more massive,
Yeah.
quite honestly. Or it was late in the process, or a million other things, right? So risk assessment is a great way for us to start thinking about these things. Any other final thoughts before we close out our day here?
I just think it works if you work it, man. I I,
Now I
I
have
think
Missy
that's the
Elliott stuck
biggest
in my
thing.
head.
You know, it it just works if you work it. So critical to start anywhere, even if it's only doing one of these steps. The most important thing is to get the risk profile of your launch,
Mhm.
and communicate that to the team, and do what you can. You'll get better. You'll get better at it. It'll improve the product, and you'll make a name for your team that does this process. It's very important.
We had to get one process in this episode, and you
You
heard it
said
here,
process.
folks.
Ah, you were talking about the process. Darn it! I thought I almost got you.
Ariel, final thoughts? Anything you want to add about risk assessment?
I feel like I've had a couple of final thought type sentences that I've said, but one thing that I just wanted to kind of reiterate on was that like talking and thinking about risk management is a real opportunity to level up your career. One of the reasons why is that it shows that you're thinking about the big picture as opposed to the little picture, right?
Yes.
Like you're not just thinking about test cases and bugs, you are thinking about the company and the players and saving the company money and making sure the players enjoy the game, right? Like it is a way to show that you have more of a big picture approach to the overall project, and that can only help you.
Agree. 100%. I'm so thankful for all of this. Now we have an opportunity for a bug. Do we have a bug today, or shall we talk about
Let's talk about Myron's elbow.
Oh,
Myron's
But
Pokemon
can
elbow?
can you describe it in the form of a bug?
oh man! Wow, this is a lot of pressure here.
What are the reproduction steps?
The reproduction steps. Thank you, thank you. Uh, get on bicycle. Um, prepare at top of prepare bicycle at top of hill, approximately 5% grade. Um, attach very flimsy, untested um, phone mount on handlebars very loosely. Preferably a phone mount that's supposed to be for cars and not for phones. Uh, utilize a phone that is too large and untested for said mount. So preferably a prestep, so a prerequisite, jiggle the bike 3 times, just like bounce the front wheel with it attached. And if it falls on the second time the wheel hits the ground, uh, that is you're ready to execute. So you put the phone back on the mount because it'll most likely work. Then um, start Pokemon Go, line up and make sure that you wait 30 seconds so that you get all of the latest Pokemon characters in the area. Look down at the phone, place legs on pedals, and give yourself a boost so that the gravity picks you up on that 5% grade. Um, and then the moment the phone falls, because it will, uh, look down and backward and flip over handlebars.
Oh,
Yes. Yes.
Actual result, flipped over handlebars.
Yes.
Expected
Yes.
result, player made it to bottom of hill without injury.
Yes. Thank you.
oh gosh. Well, this was the
It's a good bug of the day.
most painful bug of the day we've had so far on the cast.
Expected result. Capture Jigglypuff. Actual result. It was right when they started. It was right when you could catch Jigglypuff, and I
Oh
think they
man.
used some. I think they used some big data to detect when people who had
We're on
slowed
bikes.
down. Well, when people who had slowed down in their Pokemon Go play, Jigglypuff all of a sudden started showing out up like around your place. Like literally, there are times when I actually like left my apartment because Jigglypuff was near, and so I think that had. So I was trying to capture Jigglypuff.
God,
Um,
I would love to know all of the like secret formulas that determine when and where Pokemon show up in Pokemon Go, because
yeah,
like some of it has got to be like kind of basic, but there's got to be some kind of like shady stuff going on with
All
that,
right,
you know?
Niantic friends, I want to hear from you.
yes,
If you are out there and you work for Niantic and you're listening to this podcast, we want to talk with you.
Yeah,
And we promise to not be aggressive about it.
Yeah, what makes
Yeah.
Jigglypuff show up outside my house in the middle of the night?
yeah, yes. You said the middle of the night, so it happened to you too. You know what I'm talking about. But like the one funny thing is that whole summer, my friends and I we're in our 40s, so we got to yell at kids that were riding their bikes and playing Pokemon. Hey, you'll break your arm, kid! And so it was kind of like you'll shoot your eye out.
Yeah.
I was exactly thinking that. But the only thing that could have changed that is if you were in a Jigglypuff onesie after that. We gotta get Myron a Jigglypuff Kigu and make him wear it on stream. Maybe we can do a onesie stream, y'all.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Comment on this cast. Put your comments in the Discord. If we get enough, and I can't tell you what that number is, but if we get enough, we will do a
all the
onesie
comments.
stream. We will do a onesie stream.
Yes.
And I think we should do a Halloween themed cast as well.
Oh, that would
I
be
think
cute.
we should too.
And just talk about scary stuff.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Spooky.
Yes, spoopy bugs. Okay. I'm gonna give you guys a chance to plug now. What would y'all like to plug today?
I don't have anything to plug, sadly.
No. All right. I'm gonna let Myron go first. You're gonna think of something. You gotta plug something.
I'll do a small one. As we are continuing to grow our familiarity with how to do things with friends and family and colleagues, I want to actually do two things. So one is if you have a VR headset, I really strongly recommend an application called Immersed VR. Um, it actually winds up being easier in the virtual singularity to hook up multiple screens to your MacBooks than it is in real life, or at least that's my experience. But most importantly, you can create common spaces and actually work with friends and hang out in VR. It's pretty cool. That shit is the future. Again, PG-13 I think is broken at this point. And the other one I wanted to mention was Tabletopia. That's an application that you can do virtual board games. They have a bunch of different board games. And if you want to play some of those things that you had the most fun with your friends and family, highly recommend you checking out Tabletopia.
Is it on Steam or where can we find Tabletopia?
On Steam. On Steam, yeah.
How does it compare to Tabletop Simulator?
Well, the basic package is free. But what I suspect is that um, it's kind of like any of your like delivery services. Like if you use like Foodora or like Skip the Dishes or Grubhub, they have partnerships with different game producers. So I would say Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia are better together. But if you choose one, like I would say, just like for me with PS5 or Xbox, I go where most of my friends are. So you can have both. Like I have also I have board game battleground or something like that
Yeah,
online as well. So go where your friends are. But it's man, it's really amazing to play those games.
great. I have another thing to buy. Awesome. So excited.
Board Game Arena. That was the one I want.
Ariel, did you come up with something?
Yeah. So I want to plug Wasteland 3. I've been playing that like a madwoman for the past couple of weeks. It's a super, super fun game. If you really liked Wasteland 2, I think that Wasteland 3 is basically a straight up upgrade in all respects. And it's just awesome turn-based strategy RPG. I had a lot of fun with it.
I am going to plug Crusader Kings 3, which I have been playing, as well as Fall Guys, Spiritfarer, Destiny, all the things that have been able or have kept me sane. A huge shout out to the teams at D&D Beyond and Roll20 as well for helping facilitate all of my lovely tabletop um, things. But for those of you who are video game professionals or looking to get into it, um, thank you so much for providing us all a safe space to come together and talk. It's been a very challenging week. It's been a very challenging 6 months. Um, and all of us
Year,
here,
4 years, you
yeah,
name it.
thank you to everyone who is working in the industry or encourages those of us who do, to keep going. You are essential workers for all of us who look for our entertainment and social interaction that way. A huge thank you to all of you who are watching and listening today. Wherever you are, whenever you get the chance to listen to this, we hope to get the chance to interact with you, either on our Discord, or you can contact us at undergroundgameqaconf@gmail.com. That is underground game QACONF conf. Conf. We were once a conference. We are now a podcast because COVID. Or reach out to us on Twitter at undergroundqa because we want to hear from you. Huge thank you to Sarah, who is our social media and community manager. If you have any suggestions for future topics and or a bug of the day, we want to hear them because we care about hearing from the community. We want to get more people on here. We're serious about that. Come talk to us. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to be passionate about having the conversation. And we will talk
Honestly,
about anything you want.
I would love to have some non-experts on, some people who are like just getting into QA, maybe only been doing it for a year, and they ask a lot of great questions. That would be really fun to talk to someone with that level of experience.
Amen.
So if you're interested, really, and you're in QA, please, we want to hear from you. Come talk to us. We'd really love to have you on.
Yeah, or like if you want to get into QA, like I know
Yeah.
there's probably a billion gamers that are like, man, like that who are in a stage where they're like, man, QA should have caught all these things. I think I could do good in that.
God, I would love to have a chat with someone who says QA should have caught this, like, and just talk to them about all the different ways it might have been caught, but still shipped anyway.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think it's important.
So we're so thankful for you. And
we
thank
are.
you for joining us today.
Yeah,
Keep playing.
I'm thankful for
Keep
you, Chelsea.
I'm
You're an
thankful for you.
amazing facilitator, for sure.
Well, I'm thankful to all of you. And Ariel, you're a great facilitator when you do your sessions. And Myron, you're a great facilitator when you're talking about process. And
Snuck it in there.
I sure did. Keep playing, keep testing, wear a mask, and wash your damn hands, please.
Wash them.
Thank you.
mask too, mask.